Welcome back to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries. Tonight, we travel to the lonely rivers, marshes and coastal valleys of Wales. A land where mist clings to the hills, where ancient villages sit quietly beneath dark mountains, and where the night air sometimes carries sounds that no one can quite explain. For centuries, Welsh folklore has spoken of a terrifying omen, a spirit whose cry echoes across the water before death arrives. It is not a ghost in the usual sense. It does not haunt houses or graveyards. Instead, it drifts along lonely riverbanks and quiet shores, and those who hear it rarely forget the sound. The Welsh call this spirit the Cyhyraeth. Its name roughly translates to something like the groaning one, or the wailing spirit. And according to old stories, its cry means that someone nearby will soon die. Long before electric lights or modern roads, the nights in rural Wales were profoundly dark. Villages were small and scattered, often separated by miles of forest, fields, and winding rivers. At night, people relied on moonlight and candle flames. Beyond the circle of light around a cottage window, the world quickly dissolved into shadow. And in that darkness, strange sounds traveled far. The wind moving through reeds, owls calling from the trees, water moving slowly over stones. But sometimes, villagers said they heard something else. A voice, not quite human, not quite animal. A long drawn-out cry drifting through the night air. Some described it as a wail. Others said it sounded like someone struggling to breathe between sobs. But what frightened listeners most was the way the sound repeated. 3 cries, always 3. The first cry would be distant, the second closer, and the third, terrifyingly near. Those who heard the third cry often believed the spirit was passing directly beside them. And according to tradition, that meant death was very close. Descriptions of the Cyhyraeth vary across Wales, but most stories agree on one unsettling detail. Few people actually see it clearly. Instead, witnesses describe glimpses: a pale figure moving slowly along a riverbank, a shadow gliding across shallow water, or a tall shape drifting through the mist, just beyond the reach of lantern light. Some accounts claim the spirit resembles a thin, skeletal woman, wrapped in tattered cloth. Others say it appears as a dark silhouette, with long arms trailing through the water. But in nearly every story, the spirit moves silently, except for the cry, that terrible cry that echoes across valleys and marshes. In Welsh folklore, the Cyhyraeth is closely connected to rivers. This may not be a coincidence. Rivers were once among the most dangerous places in rural life. People relied on them for water, fishing, and travel. But they were also unpredictable. Floods could rise suddenly. Strong currents could sweep someone away without warning. Many villages developed legends that connected rivers with the boundary between the living and the dead. In this way, the Cyhyraeth became something like a messenger, a spirit moving along the edge of that boundary. It was not said to cause death, but it warned of it. Some of the most chilling stories about the Cyhyraeth come from fishermen. Men who worked alone on quiet rivers late at night sometimes reported hearing the spirit's cry drifting across the water. One story, told in parts of West Wales, describes a fisherman returning home before dawn. As he walked along the riverbank carrying his nets, he heard a strange sound rising from the mist. At first he thought it was the wind, but then the cry came again. Long, broken, desperate. 3 times it echoed across the water. The fisherman hurried home, deeply shaken. The following day, news arrived that a man in the nearby village had died suddenly during the night. Stories like this were repeated across generations, strengthening the belief that the spirit's cry was never random. It always meant something. Some Welsh traditions say the Cyhyraeth appears before disasters that affect many people at once. In these tales, witnesses do not hear just one voice. Instead, they hear many voices crying together, a chorus of wailing spirits moving along the water. According to legend, this happens before great tragedies. Floods, shipwrecks, or plagues. One old story describes villagers hearing dozens of voices crying along the coastline during a stormy night. Days later, a ship was wrecked nearby, and many sailors lost their lives. Whether coincidence or folklore, stories like this made the spirit one of the most feared omens in Welsh tradition. Interestingly, the Cyhyraeth shares similarities with another well-known death omen from Celtic folklore, the banshee. Both spirits are said to cry or wail before someone dies. Both appear near water or in lonely places, and both are deeply connected to the idea that death leaves echoes in the world before it happens. But the Cyhyraeth is considered far darker. While the banshee is often described as mournful or sorrowful, the Cyhyraeth's cry is described as harsh, broken, and terrifying, almost like the sound of someone already suffering. Some historians believe the legend may have grown from natural sounds. Marshlands and rivers can produce eerie noises, especially at night. Wind moving across reeds can create long, low wails. Certain birds also produce calls that sound strangely human in the dark. Before modern explanations, it would have been easy for tired travelers or lonely fishermen to interpret these sounds as something supernatural. But even today, some people who live near quiet rivers in Wales claim they have heard strange cries in the night. Sounds that don't quite match any animal. Sounds that seem almost deliberate. Today, the legend of the Cyhyraeth survives mostly in stories and folklore collections. Yet the atmosphere that gave birth to the legend still exists. If you visit rural Wales on a cold night, you may find yourself walking beside a silent river under a pale moon. The water moves slowly. The wind stirs the reeds. The hills block out distant lights. And if a strange sound drifts across the darkness, you might pause for a moment, just to listen. Because according to the old stories, if the cry comes once, you should leave quickly. If it comes twice, you should hurry home. But if you ever hear it 3 times, the villagers say the spirit is already very close. Thank you for joining me tonight on Bedtime Myths and Mysteries. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into folklore, forgotten history, and the darker corners of myth, consider subscribing so you don't miss future stories. And until next time, sleep well. But if you ever find yourself walking beside a lonely river in the Welsh countryside, and the night air carries a distant cry across the water, you might want to keep walking and try not to listen too closely.